Welcome back to another edition of the Bold American podcast presented by Barstool Sports. It's just going to be me, Ryan, and producer Sands jumping in. Jesus, I really do have foggy dad brain, and I've never really said that. But Sands, I had to think about what your name was for a second there as I was speaking. It wasn't coming to me. I was like, wait, what's his name? Anyway, Rob is out, so it's me, Ryan, and Sands. Certainly, we're going to discuss this past week, because there have been a few events that have occurred, specifically Charlie Kirk assassination and the shooting or supposed shooting at the Naval Academy that were all over social media, all over the world, that bear discussing. And then from there, we have a really super interesting interview with a gentleman by the name of veteran Seth Harp, who wrote the book entitled The Fort Bragg Cartel, Drug Trafficking and Murder in the Special Forces. And actually, I'm being told now HBO is getting involved, and they are going to be making this into a show or a documentary or something. HBO is getting involved. But super fascinating story. Rob sat down with him and went through everything that's going on there at Fort Bragg that I think has kind of been floating around the ether for a long time in military circles, but not really widely known, and certainly not to the detail that Seth puts into his book. So really fascinating conversation there that I think everybody's going to enjoy. And all of that is going to be brought to you by our pals at Hey Dude. Nothing says American fall like comfort, simplicity, and doing things your own way. And that's what Hey Dude is all about. So whether you're road tripping to the lake, lighting up the backyard barbecue, heading to the tailgate, or catching local fireworks with your crew, Hey Dude shoes are ready to roll. They're lightweight, breathable, built for the fall, all different temperatures. So slip them on, kick back, and let freedom ring without your feet ever paying the price. So head over to heydude.com/barstool and step into Hey Dude country, where every day feels like fall, summer, spring, winter, and every step feels like freedom. All right, so let's just start with in the immediate last 72. Ryan, what's going on? How was the last 72?
Last 72 was good. I was just got back from Annapolis, went to the Annapolis 9/11 Heroes Run that the Travis Manning Foundation puts on, our 5K race series. And so cool this is one of over 100 races that we host across the country. But this one's pretty awesome because majority of the participants are midshipmen at the Naval Academy. And so, you get out and you talk to people about, I go to these runs and I'll stand up in front of the crowd and talk to people about honoring those that serve. And then you're standing in front of all these midshipmen that are going forward into a life of service. So just really inspiring and gets me fired up. And on September 11th, I was at a Old Dominion country band, did a benefit concert for the Travis Manning Foundation. And that was pretty awesome. So
that was done in Austin, right?
It was in Austin, yeah. And
where in Austin? What venue?
It was at the Moody Center on on UT's campus. And so that was pretty cool. Did a concert for us. All the sales from the tickets went back to the Travis Manning Foundation, and yeah, it was awesome.
Have you been to Austin before? You had to have been to Austin before, right?
Never been to Austin before.
Wow. I wish I had known that.
Yeah.
Because I used to live there, and I've been there recently. And also,
I think that was also listed as one of your used to be one of your favorite cities. So
yeah, it's still awesome. It's still awesome. It's just changed to a little bit to where like there are certain things about it that I don't love as compared to 10 years ago, but change happens, life goes on. But what did you think of Austin?
I loved it. I thought it was, I've been to a lot of cities in Texas. I liked it. It was like super eclectic. I really like that vibe.
You don't feel like you're in Texas. Outside of the weather, it doesn't feel like Texas. Like people, I think Texas, like I've been out to West Texas. That's Texas. Even like Dallas, Fort Worth has a more Texas feel to it. Austin doesn't feel like Texas.
Yeah, I thought it was great. Again, I had pretty limited time there. But from what I got to experience, it was good. I bought my first pair of cowboy boots. So that was fun, and food was good, music was good. Why you saying, oh my God? What? Like,
It's just so aggressive. Goes to Texas once, buys cowboy boots.
no, I've been to Texas 1,000 times. FYI, I've just never been to
Okay, all right.
Austin. I've been to
Okay, all right.
Texas. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
I
all
just
right.
I wanted the full experience of buying a pair of cowboy boots there. So
Nice.
to wear to the
Yeah.
concert, naturally. I needed
Oh,
something to wear to
okay.
the concert. So
All right. That works. That works.
and I will share with you that when I asked my goddaughter, I'm going to Clemson this weekend, and when I said, what do I wear? And she said, oh, you have to get real dressed up. Most of the girls wear cute dresses and cowboy boots. So I was
all right,
like,
perfect.
2 for 1. There we go.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I just don't think you're going to be wearing those around, Bucks County and Philly anytime soon.
No, I am. No, I'm bringing it. I'm bringing the cowboy boots to Philly for sure.
Okay.
You'll
All
see.
right. All right. All right. No, I think Austin is still, like I said, a great city, and I'm not surprised to hear you had fun. It's just a little more crowded than it used to be, but still a lot of fun. So that's not surprising.
Yeah.
And thank you to Old Dominion for giving their love to Travis Manion. And that was the other thing I was going to ask you. Is Travis Manion kind of like the de facto nonprofit for the Naval Academy now? Can you just say that?
What do you mean? I mean,
like, I feel like in terms of the nonprofit space,
yeah.
Obviously, you guys have a massive connection to the Naval Academy.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of any other, and I'm sure they do stuff with other nonprofits, but I can't think of anyone else who has that same level of connection. So, like, is Travis Manion maybe like the go-to nonprofit for the Naval Academy?
I mean, I don't know that officially in any capacity we are, but certainly I think you'd be hard pressed to find a midshipman at the Naval Academy that is not familiar with Travis's story or the foundation. So, we do a lot with them. We'd love to do more with West Point too. Just saying. So,
all right. Well, let's talk offline. I can put you in touch with people that can make that happen.
Okay.
What would you like to do? I'm asking earnestly, genuinely. What would make sense to do?
I mean, we have an Annapolis chapter. We work with a lot of the midshipmen on different service projects and campaigns. We do the honor project. Actually, we did do the honor project at West Point Cemetery, where we laid tokens at the West Point Cemetery. But I just think, again, it's not the typical school where you're looking for kids to serve even more, but they can always be given back. And listen, a lot of kids on restriction need service hours, so we have opportunities for that too. And beyond that, we have incredible veterans that can share their story as well. We'll talk offline.
All right, that's cool. That sounds good. Sans, how about your last 72?
Let's see. I'm hoping I cut down some background noise here. But last 72. Friday was fine, but Saturday was great because the Buckeyes won. That's always exciting watching the Buckeyes win. But then yesterday, my happiness just depends on what happens with my football teams in football season. Mm-hmm. And the Pittsburgh Steelers have the worst defense in the NFL and the highest paid defense in the NFL. So I was very, very upset yesterday. I think I laid in bed and sulked the better half of my Sunday afternoon. So the 50-50, good and bad, because again the Buckeyes beat the Bobcats. Shout out, your coworker Tate didn't have to change his name to Bobcats. Other than that, though, Steelers stink, and I want Tomlin fired after week 2.
Well, also, Sans, the Steelers do stink. I'll admit that, but they don't stink as bad as the Chiefs. So you got that going for you, right?
Yeah, so far, right. I don't know. If I was betting on a 1-1 Steelers team or an 0-2 Chiefs team who would win a playoff game this season, it'd still be the Chiefs. The Steelers haven't won a playoff game in 8 seasons. We're stuck in this purgatory hell, and I can't get out of it, and it's just frustrating.
I get that.
Yeah, but Sans, in your lifetime, how many Super Bowls now have you seen? 2?
2. I've won 2 and then lost 1 to Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, so you've been to 3. So, I mean, you got to take some solace there.
I know, but it's been like 20 years.
Yeah, but even still, like some people will go their whole lifetime and never see a Super Bowl.
That's true. Shout out.
Think about Bills fans, So.
Well, it's fair. I can't be too spoiled, but, you know, we're used to 6 Super Bowl rings, but I can't keep bringing up six Super Bowl rings because we haven't won a playoff game in 8 years. Like, so none of that matters. I don't
Yeah,
know.
that's bad.
It's hell.
That's bad.
Tomlin's on his way out, I hope, but probably not.
Yeah. Navy won again, although I was like flipping between a bunch of games because on Saturday I was solo parent with 2 kids for the first time. So I was figuring out how the heck to do that. And for the most part, it's easy-ish when the one is just so young that they're just laying there. And my daughter is old enough that I can speak to her and, assuming she listens, does things. But anyway, I was flipping over the Navy game and they did not look too sharp, but obviously they turned it around and finished the game very strong, which I was surprised to see that they were playing Tulsa close. But I at this point, I don't want to speak ill of anybody. But yeah, they still won. But yeah, that was my last 72. The big part was doing the first solo parent ride. And it also reminded me, last week I was doing an errand and I ended up in a diner with my son. 2 things. Number one, I don't know, my son's 3 weeks old. Some people were like, what are you doing with your son out so young? We kind of look at it like you got to get him out in the world,
Yeah.
It's not like it's the dead of winter when there's a bunch of germs and stuff floating around. So, I'm not taking him to a crowded bar. It was a diner. And there were only, in the section I was in, it was completely empty other than these 2 women. I don't know. Well, I'll just say, I won't speculate on their age. They were older than me. They were of a different generation. They could not stop fawning over me. The fact that I was there with my son, the fact that I mentioned, oh, my wife's out getting her nails done while I'm running the errand with my son. My daughter's at daycare. They could not be more impressed. At one point, I was feeding my son during my meal, and they just kept turning around and telling me how amazing I was and what a good father and what a good husband. And naturally, I'm just basking in all of this and saying, it's no big deal. It's no big deal. But it really is true that the previous generation of fathers, the bar is in the basement. I've heard from so many guys where if you're out with your children, the older generation is just like, wow, that's so impressive. Because like our dads just didn't do that. There was a byproduct of the culture, their amount of time they were around, whatever. It's just very different now. And it's very easy to get compliments from women when you're a father out with your children. So I thought that was interesting.
Did you head home with like a puffed out chest and big head being like, yeah, I still got it?
No. Although I did tell my wife they were kind of flirting with me a little bit.
Of course. Yeah.
But no, because seriously, I wasn't doing anything special.
I mean,
Duna. I'm eating a meal.
I think for women, it's super attractive for men to see men like not pretend that they're too masculine to like tend to their children. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I do. But what does that say? That you're
like you said,
so
the
attracted to that.
That the bar's really freaking low. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's what's interesting. I mean, Sans, you're a single guy, right? Or do you have a person in your life?
No, recently single.
All right. So listen, you don't have to do much, man. It's unbelievable. You don't have to really do too much to separate yourself from other guys.
I've got 2 healthy puppies, and that's my biggest selling point. It's like, look, I can take care of myself and 2 dogs. Now what? Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's basically the same thing.
It's like total. It's exactly the same thing. 2 dogs, 2 kids. Same thing.
Right.
Totally the same thing. Yeah. But anyway, so that was my
good
last
job, Dad.
Of note. Thank you so much.
Good job.
Thank you. But anyway, on a more serious note, getting into the last 168, the last week, we saw a really horrific event, and unfortunately, we saw it play out in vivid detail across social media. Because there were a lot of videos of the Charlie Kirk assassination, and it's just a really, I mean, to see anybody murdered on videos is horrible, but the nature of the video, given, that he was, was a prominent figure, and I'm a little bit at a loss right now, other than to say it was just a really horrible horrible act of violence. And I know this has been litigated all over the internet at this point, but when you boil it down, he was killed because he had opinions that differed from other people, and that is the antithesis of what this country was founded on. And the fact that he lost his life because he was vocal about his opinions and they angered other people is just really, really sad. And on the heels of our 9/11 discussion and talking about how on 9/12/2001 we came together as a country, it's sad and it's scary to see how far we've come from that. So it was really just a real dark day all around. And I can't recall another incident. Certainly we've, in the last, we'll say 10 years, we've had horrible incidents happen and people have lost their lives, but something felt different about this one. So just kind of curious, Ryan, we'll start with you, just what your reaction was to that horrific event.
We're almost a week out from when it happened. I was in Austin when it happened. My phone started blowing up that Charlie Kirk had been shot. And then I hadn't seen the video. And then I had friends texting me, I saw the video. There's no way he's going to survive this. I watched the video. I regret that I watched it because it was truly disturbing to watch. When things, I don't want to say things like this because this is a little bit unprecedented, but like when things happen that are politically divisive, I always try to take the opportunity to look at both sides of things and find understanding and be diplomatic in my response and opinion on things. In this circumstance, I feel like there's no diplomatic answer that I can give. Like, I'm so taken back that we have gotten to this point as a country, beyond the horrific act of political violence, taking the life of someone because you did not like what he said. You didn't like the opinions he gave. What is even worse than that, than one sick individual who took his life, is what I have seen over the following days, where people are actually making justifications for why he was killed. And I have zero tolerance for it, like zero. Like, I refuse to look at it from your angle of he said this or he did this. I don't give a shit what he said. I could care less. Don't play me another Charlie Kirk video talking about that he was misogynistic or homophobic, because number one, I don't believe that he was any of those things. I think most of his videos were taken completely out of context. They're not showing the long form of it. They're taking little clips to make it look, and I don't care if he was. I really don't. Like, people making light of this and making justifications and joking about his death, like, it's disgusting. I have blocked people that I followed on Instagram like fitness influencers that I followed them because I like their strength training. And then I see them put stuff up. Like, it is wild to me that we live in this world where we can be so callous about the death of another individual. And I also don't want comparisons to other people that have died on the other side of the aisle. I don't want it. I don't want, well, nobody did this. And the other thing I'm going to say here is the response to his death has been, like you talked about, like, and I was thinking back to our conversation, Connor, and we talked about, like, how do we get back to that place on 9/12 where we were so together as a country and so committed and so unified under this umbrella of, like, we, outside of our differences, we love what this country stands for. What I have witnessed in the days that have followed Charlie Kirk's assassination I don't know how we ever get back there. I honestly don't know. I'm beside myself with this whole thing.
Yeah, the whole like, yeah, but it's like, no, there's no yeah, but here.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no justifying that he should have been murdered. Doesn't matter what he said. Like, and I felt the same way too. There were people, posting a bunch of stuff, and I just thought to myself, how are you okay that somebody's life was taken?
Yeah.
How did that not bother you?
And the other thing, to bring it back on from a military perspective, is the number of, and Rob talks about, I know Rob, if he was on right now, he'd be going off because he has a big problem with service members with these public accounts, and they say whatever they want to say. The number of service members, that were posting, and you saw like our Secretary Collins put something out, our Pete Heggs has put something out, the Secretary of the Navy put something out. If you see people posting, send them to us. Like, you serve at the will of the president. You work for the federal government. So stop talking to me about your freedom of speech. You have to abide by different rules and different standards. Like, no ifs, ands, or buts. Just like you don't get to say what you're getting stuck in your arm before you go off to deploy. It's the same type of thing, And I'm so disgusted that there was, and I'm going to bring it up because, and I think she's been on this show, Amy McGrath, and I've had conversations with her. She was, I think, a helicopter pilot, service member. She put out a tweet saying, "Oh, is this what we're going to do now? Rat out fellow service members for what they're posting on social media." And yeah, that is what we're going to do. And that is what we should be doing. We should be bringing forward any person who is making light or justifying or joking about this situation. 100%. If you serve in uniform, 100%, it should be brought to your superiors for, investigation.
Yeah. And that was one of the things that I thought was very different about this incident and this horrific murder as compared to other incidents that have happened. I don't recall times where people have, well, one, been celebratory that someone was killed, but two, where then people were losing their jobs, or in this case, the military, it being, because I've seen multiple people have repercussions for things they posted on social media within the military ranks. There was actually a really well-known female in the military community who deleted all her social media, and I'm told is in trouble for what she posted. So I can't recall anytime someone was killed and people losing their jobs. And I'm sure there are examples, and I'm just not remembering them. And I apologize for that, but it just, that's part of what I think feels different about this, that at the end of the day, like we said, somebody was killed, and it's not, I've used the example, like, he wasn't a pedophile, he didn't have heinous crimes to his name. He was killed because of the opinions that he believed. And what's really, really upsetting is that when you do go back and watch those clips, he was engaging in debate with people, and he welcomed people that didn't have the same view as him on whatever topic. And his whole platform was like, well, let's talk about it. And especially on social media, but that platform of let's have a debate, and maybe we will finish and we won't agree on everything, or maybe we'll agree on some things, or we'll stay unchanged, but let's talk about it in a civil manner. That's another thing that it feels as though that has all but disappeared from our society, because it's not about let's have discourse. It's about, I want to tell you why you're wrong, why you're an idiot for having those beliefs, why you're a horrible human. And it's tribalism at its worst. So it's just different on so many levels. Sorry, Sans, what were your takeaways when you saw this go down?
You guys pretty much, said just about everything that I think there is to be said about it. That it just, when I got a text from my buddy, it was like Charlie Kirk just got assassinated, and then like Ryan, I saw the video, and it's like, first thought is like, damn, this guy who just like you said, he brings in people for open debate, even though you have different opinions and all of that. I don't think just because I have a different opinion than you that it should ever come down to a bullet from a rifle. To take he was highly intelligent. He knew a lot of stuff. And just because he had certain views that you might have disagreed with, like, it's just gross to see, like, a young husband and father just taken away and kind of like the prime of his political rising. And it's like, it's shit you used to read about in like history books as a kid. For me, it's like, okay, the Kennedy assassination, stuff like that. Like it's just very surreal. And like you were saying, Ryan, like to see like the reaction and how divisive people were following that. Disgusting. The young woman at the campus dancing around, like yelling he's dead at his vigil. I'm saying that wrong, but then she gets arrested. But it's like what are we doing? Like, what? How can a death ever be celebrated? How, like like I said, a young man, a father, like it's just it's heartbreaking that, like,
yeah, but even that, like,
this is where we're at.
The fact, I didn't realize it, or maybe I forgot. I mean, 31 is super young.
Yeah, he's my age.
It was very, very sad, obviously, that he was married and had children. There was one video of his daughter running to him, and as a parent, like, your heart breaks. But like, let's just say he was a single guy, had no family to his name. It's still horrific.
Right.
Yeah. No, it makes it obviously it makes it. I think it changes the whole scenario, but it's just on its face. I don't know. Like, I'll say this: I think if you are able to joke about a human being being killed, there's something wrong with you. I don't think that's that crazy to think either. I think you have to look inside yourself that you find it funny, or you're making a video to try to get clicks. Jeez, I don't know how to make sense of that, and that's I think a deeper problem that you have to deal with as an individual. But just the overall horrible.
I think that's it. There's a deeper problem here, a much deeper problem. And I think that the media plays a large role in that. I think we have I hope that we are at the tipping point of some sort of change, because the temperature is so high right now. And to see something like this happen, and to see people at the highest level. This isn't just a bunch of young, crazy people that are posting stuff. Like, people at the highest level, people in elected positions that are making justifications, celebrities that are saying things and immediately taking them back because of immediate backlash. But like, it's, I honestly continue to have no words about how disgusted I am by how this has played out through social media and people's reaction to this.
And speaking of that, how do you guys feel about people in the military losing jobs, or even civilians having their employment impacted by what they put out on social media? How do you feel about that?
I am a huge defender of free speech, but the fact of the matter is that like I said, you serve in the military, and you're held to a different standard because of your role in the military, and frankly, as a individual, a civilian, right? And being an at-will employer, like, companies can decide what type of people they want working for them. Like, free speech does not mean that there can't be consequences.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I mean, I would say,
I think so. It's here, not to cut you off, but it's Article 134 of the UCMJ. The general article prohibits service members from social media conduct that prejudices good order and discipline or brings discredit upon the armed forces. This includes posting obscene or inappropriate content, disloyal statements, harassment, threats, or sensitive information linking to violating material or engaging in online bullying. Violations can lead to court-martial with penalties up to dishonorable discharge. Like, that's the rules.
Yeah, and I also think it goes a little bit further, and I think that's kind of like what Cons was saying with the question is like there's there are some civilian people who have been fired for this, like pilots, teachers, healthcare workers. There was Matthew Dode from MSNBC who got fired for his comments as it was happening. So it's just again, it goes right back to that divisiveness. Like the workplace doesn't matter kind of where you work. Obviously, the military, yes, like you have to abide by the UCMJ. That's how that shit works, but like that's not a place for the workplace. No matter where you're at, shouldn't be a place for. I mean, there's no place for celebrating it at all. But yeah, it's just it. Well, I don't know. I don't take sympathy on the people that lost their jobs for this.
I don't either. Yeah, I care less. And I think I have a friend of mine who had posted, and I'm like, exactly, nailed it. Anyone who cheers the assassination of a political opponent has no business working with children in healthcare or any in position of consequence. This isn't cancel culture, because I have a big problem with cancel culture too. Mm-hmm. But this isn't cancel culture, right?
Yeah, cancel culture is like pulling up a tweet from like 18 years ago and trying to get someone fired for that.
Right. This is like protecting society from like basically like the morally depraved. Because if you're going to celebrate the death of someone else, that's essentially what you are. So you shouldn't be trusted with decision-making authority. I don't want my kids going to a school. There was a teacher who played the Charlie Kirk assassination for 10 and 11-year-old children and then talked about why it was a good thing.
Oh, my God. I mean, I have a real big problem, and this is a whole other discussion, but, what's being taught in schools and how teachers can kind of just do as they please. And I would be so upset if that was my child in that classroom, that you're just showing that to my child. Like I didn't provide permission for you to show that video to my child. That's a whole other discussion. But nevertheless, just a lot of consequences here. I hope that maybe that some good can come over this, and maybe people can follow his example of let's just have a conversation. Because when you boil it down, that was his platform. He wanted to talk to people and have an educated, civil conversation and stop the divisiveness, because the anger, the combativeness, that's not going to bring our country back together. We got to be able to talk, and you got to be able to have a different opinion than someone and then not want the worst things to happen to them. You need to be able to just hear their opinions, say, okay, I don't agree with that, and then move on from there. So
I think you're being a little optimistic about
I am forever optimistic. You're right. No, I think that's a tall order.
And I'm normally an optimistic person too. In this, I'm not there yet. I'm yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I that is very optimistic of me to think that like maybe something any good can come of this. I just hope that it can. But anyway, we'll move on from that topic. I don't think the conversation about this incident is going to slow down anytime soon. I think it's going to be discussed for a long time, and I do think we'll have to wait and see. I think it's going to shape politics for the foreseeable future. So we'll see how that plays out. Another crazy incident, though, that happened last week took place at the Naval Academy, a place where in the unfortunate society where we live, where school shootings happen all the time, which it's crazy how desensitized we've become to school shootings, that seemingly they don't even make the news anymore, or if they do, no one really talks about them, and that's horrible on its face. but there was a story about a potential school shooting at one of the places, like I said, you would never think would have a school shooting. That was the Naval Academy. And Ryan, what happened there last week?
So that was on September 11th. I got a text from my daughter in late afternoon, and she texted me and said that they'd just been informed that there was an active shooter on campus. She was at practice, so she was at the stadium. There was it. I want to be sensitive about how I say this. The reports of an active shooter were false. It was a hoax, but it was a hoax that led to a lot of confusion and misinformation, and put the academy into a place where there was a lot of chaos around the situation. Unfortunately, one midshipman was shot by military police. Yeah, it was scary. I was, texting back and forth with my daughter, trying to get as much information as I could from other people.
But how did you hear about it? How did you first hear about it? Did you
my
see
daughter.
it, or she
No,
just called and texted? Okay.
She texted me before it hadn't even hit the news yet.
Yeah.
So it was about hour and a half before my phone started blowing up from people like, how's your daughter? What's going on? And so she was getting information from, her leadership within her company. But again, she was at the stadium. So she was with her team. They were, and the active shooter was supposedly in Bancroft, which is the dorms at the Naval Academy. Yeah, it was a lot. I was already so on edge from the Charlie Kirk assassination the day before. Yeah. It's on September 11th. And then there were other active shooters on other campuses, which were not a hoax. I think it was UMass. There was an active shooter.
I didn't even see that. See, yeah. There you go. Like, I didn't even know that. I didn't see that.
At the same exact time. And that turned out, I think, to be legitimate. Like, there was a shooter on campus at UMass. And so, you start to think, like, what's happening right now? Is this going to get worse? Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the state of where we are right now. And again, it kind of all leads back to a lot of misinformation online. Like, if you look at the circumstances around what happened at the Naval Academy, it was things that were put online that led to this chaos. So it's a lot of misinformation online. And frankly, I think that's what leads to a lot of the issues that we're facing as a society today. A lot of misinformation online, Yeah,
because it's not about, hey, let's get the right information out there. It's let's just get information out there, and we need to be first.
Yeah, so. And I mean, we joked last week, and I know it was a funny clip, and people were laughing about it, but like the Mel Gibson thing, right? Like, haha, that was really funny, but like, I totally believed it. And then you're looking at the comments, and people are just like, no, literally, people in the comments of our post were like, no, that's real. They literally were commenting like, no, that is real. Mel Gibson is getting it. And I'm like,
right.
No, he's not. So it just goes to show, and it's like, where do you capture your news from? Like, where do you get real sources and real news? Like, I felt like my girlfriend, Jenna Lee, she used to be on Fox News. She runs a platform called Smarter News. I follow her on Instagram, and it is just nonpartisan facts. And like, that's where I get my news from, because I know it's no BS. She won't put anything out until it is completely verified. But people fall for anything these days. And that's tough.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm glad it wasn't more serious than it was at the Naval Academy. And again, it's just crazy to think that, Jesus, if something like that can happen at a school that is a military base where you would think the security is more heightened than anywhere else in the world or anywhere else in this country. You know, what does that say about our high schools and our elementary schools? And it's just a scary thought to think about how often these sorts of things happen. And with the misinformation that you mentioned, how I don't know how you protect it from happening again in the future. Like and it's funny. If you go back to the very first episode of Zero Blog 30, way back in September 2016, we talked about guns and the Second Amendment and school shootings. And here we are, 2025, and we're still talking about this stuff. And, you know, by and large, nothing has changed. So that's almost, actually, yeah. No, almost, yeah, 9 years later, and nothing has changed. So
nothing's changed, and both sides are pointing fingers at each other for why nothing has changed.
You wish, like, kind of going back to something I said earlier, can it just be enough for everybody to say, like, hey, we don't want people to die. We don't want innocent people. We don't want innocent kids to die anymore. Like, why is that not enough? And listen, I know that's a very Pollyanna, maybe simple view, but that should be enough that, like, anybody, regardless if you're left, right, Republican, Democrat, young, old, male, female, whatever, like, at the most basic level, we're all humans, and you should just not want people to die. People who did not do anything wrong. And I know that's not the world we live in, unfortunately. I'm just kind of distraught.
So Sam Harris, and I'm not like the hugest Sam Harris fan, but he wrote an article in the Free Press, and it was like over Charlie Kirk's murder. And, you know, he said Charlie Kirk's murder was especially terrible crime for several reasons. The fact that it occurred on a college campus in front of thousands of students, the manner in which it was immediately broadcast on social media, the presence of his wife and children at the scene, the unavoidable sense that both the causes and consequences had to be political. Whatever the killer's motives, he dropped a match onto an information landscape that was ready to burn. And, you know, and the whole point of the article was essentially like social media amplifies extreme views as though they are representative of most Americans, right?
Right.
And they're not. Many of us are losing our sense of what people are really like. Like we see, you know?
You're right. I don't know who it was or what the sentiment was. Just if you go outside and just talk to people right now, you'll probably get along with them. So, for example, last weekend, not this past weekend, weekend ago, I had my block party. Politics weren't discussed. Everybody was smiling and having a nice time. Met new people, new neighbors who just moved in, and everybody was welcoming, and there were kids running around. You would think, like, there's nothing wrong in the world right now. By the way, things were going on at this block party. And I think that's, by and large, I think that's largely the reality across this country.
Right. But then you get on social media, and like Sam Harris writes, you get on social media and we start to poison ourselves, and we invite these people to poison us. You know, we're like inviting this content into our lives. And when you have all these young kids who are super impressionable, you know, their frontal lobe isn't even fully developed, and they just have this data dump of false information and just imploding their brains. You know, it's brainwashing. It's crazy.
Yeah. Scary. Because nobody has the answer how to fix it, unfortunately. And I think that's the scariest part of it all, is I don't know where we go from here or how things change or if they only get worse. Scary. You know what else is scary, though? Drug cartels within the military. And we're going to throw it to our interview we did now with Rob and Seth about his new book about the drug cartel and not just what's going on in Fort Bragg, but just the culture in general around the special operations community. It was eye-opening listening to him talk. Again, as I said, these sorts of things have always just kind of been talked about a little bit and floated around, but to hear him go into detail about how in-depth things are with the special operations community and illegal activity, you think to yourself, whoa, I thought this was only in movies and TV shows, and you don't realize, oh, this is very real. So fascinating guy. Have a listen.
All right, everybody. I'm very excited for this interview. The Fort Bragg Cartel author, Seth Harp, is here today to talk about his book, his story, and what the heck is going on at Fort Bragg. So with that, Seth, welcome to the Bold American Podcast.
Hey, Rob. Thanks for having me. Good to be with you.
Of course. So how's the media tour been? I feel like you've been doing a couple of these a day, maybe for the whole past month. Like, talk to us about your last few weeks since the book has been released, and anything else you want to add about that.
Not much to say. I'm not really a media professional by occupation. I'm a writer, so it's kind of strange to like come blinking out of your cave into the darkness after years of solitary toil into the light. But it's been gratifying to see the degree of reader interest out there, and I'm happy to do as many shows as I can to get the word about some of the important issues that I cover in my book.
Well, so let's get into a little bit about you first. So what's the Seth Harp story? How did you get to authoring or investigating and then authoring something of this magnitude?
It's a long process. I've been a reporter for 10 years. And before that, I was a lawyer. Actually, I worked for the state of Texas as an assistant attorney general. And in college and in law school, I served in the Army Reserves and was called up and did one tour of duty in Iraq. And that was the basis of my military background or interest in military issues, foreign policy, foreign wars.
Gotcha.
When I became a journalist, I mostly did war reporting overseas, and that came to a stop during COVID. And in December of 2020, I read an article that said that 2 veteran Fort Bragg soldiers have been found murdered. Their bodies dumped in the woods of Fort Bragg,
Mm-hmm.
and one of them had previously killed a guy in his house and gotten away with it, and had been ruled a justified homicide. And when I read that, I knew there had to be more to the story. And there certainly was, but that was the genesis of the book.
Gotcha. So what year did you deploy and what was your MOS? Just curious.
I was in Iraq for all of 2004 and the first 3 months of 2005. My MOS, I can no longer remember the alphanumeric. I was a combat engineer.
Gotcha. Put you on the spot there, Seth.
And I mostly just drove a truck around.
Yeah.
I was in the 277th Engineer Company out of San Antonio, Texas. It was attached to the 84th Engineer Battalion, which is an active duty unit that was based at least in Schofield Barracks, Hawaii.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah. So you did that deployment, and then you went back to school essentially at UT, right? And then you went to law school, and then writer, author. Have you done up until before we get to Fort Bragg? Had you done any investigative, high profile editorials, stories, like anything, from Syria or overseas before you kind of ventured in like the Fort Bragg story?
I was writing for, national magazines, Rolling Stone, Harper's, The New Yorker, many other publications as well. And there was moderate to high reception to some of those stories, but nothing like the Fort Bragg murders, which was the name of the first Rolling Stone article that I did on this subject. Got
it. Okay. So I was an Army officer. I was a 13 Alpha, so field artillery. I had been stationed at Fort Bliss and in Germany before I got out of the military. So I'm actually one of the few officers that maybe has never been to Fort Bragg. I have a lot of friends that have served there, that have deployed out of there, that have been in all different types of units out of Fort Bragg, conventional to unconventional. I went to West Point, so still have friends that are my classmates that are there in company command type positions or on staff. And so with that, since I've never been to Fort Bragg and some of our listeners and viewers maybe are not familiar with Fort Bragg, could you kind of give us a summary as to what is located there, what kind of units are there, and then maybe we can dive in.
Fort Bragg is the largest and most important U.S. military base, U.S. Army base, I should say. There's 50,000 soldiers there, and they're mostly infantry or special forces. You know, the biggest tenant is the 82nd Airborne Division, which of course is the U.S. main fighting force. The 82nd and the 101st Airborne. The contingency force is what they call it. You know, the first to deploy.
Yeah.
The special forces are based at Fort Bragg, so there are special forces groups all over the country, but the headquarters is at Bragg, and they all train at Bragg. So if you're a Green Beret, then you're trained at Bragg. It's also the headquarters of the Joint Special Operations Command, which is significantly more elite and secretive than just the regular special forces, and is in command of units like SEAL Team 6 and Delta Force. Now, Team 6 isn't based at Bragg, but Delta Force is, and I really spent a lot of time in the book focused on Delta Force specifically because it is the most elite unit in the military and has a very low profile. And has been at the bleeding edge of all U.S. military operations since 2001. And really, it's kind of amazing that until my book, the Fort Bragg Cartel, until that was published, there really wasn't any book-length investigative journalism about Delta Force. You know, there's a few scattered memoirs here and there, but they're not particularly informative about the unit. And so that was something that was a hole I was trying to fill.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was talking to some friends about this who are Green Berets, and looking back, I know people who are in CAG. I've been in CAG. I grew up as an Army brat, so I'm kind of familiar with the unit. I know people, like I said, who have been in it and deployed with it. But to your point, it's not like SEAL Team 6. It's not like Ranger Bat. It's not like the Green Berets, where there's all these stories and tales and TV shows and like influencers doing interviews, right? It's a low profile unit. Do you think that's on purpose, or could you kind of talk about some of that?
Yes, I think it's on purpose. I think that it's hard to, describe the intentionality behind SEAL Team 6's relative lack of discretion, I guess. But look, just yesterday there was a report in the New York Times about a SEAL Team 6 mission that went wrong, where they were trying to plant listening devices. This is according to the Times. They were trying to plant, David Phillips and Matthew Cole were the reporters. Those two guys have done great work on Navy SEALs and on SEAL Team 6, by the way. And they published a story yesterday that revealed that Team 6 did a mission in North Korea in 2019, if I'm not mistaken, where they were trying to plant a listening device and were surprised by some just completely unarmed, hapless North Korean oyster fishermen. And they just killed them all and sank their bodies and then got out of there without completing the mission. So, that's another example of Team 6 leaking to the press. I don't know who leaked that story to them, but it clearly came from a military source, clearly came from the inside.
Right.
And that's something you very rarely, or that's something I have never seen with Delta Force. I've never seen the unit leak. I could be wrong about that. There may be something I missed, but as far as I know, that they've never leaked. And that's a reflection of their more, I would say, not senior, but there's a certain implicit hierarchy in these things. Both Team 6 and Delta Force are special mission units in JSOC, broadly similar capabilities, but the Army, Delta Force being older, the Army being the biggest service branch, it's being co-located with the JSOC headquarters at Bragg. for all these reasons, Delta Force is just a little bit has the reputation of being, more quiet, more mature, more professional than Team 6. And the quote I've heard, if people have heard me on other podcasts, they may have already heard me say this, but what the Army guys say is Army guys make history, or excuse me, SEALs write books and Army guys write history is the way they look at it, themselves.
I like that. I kind of like that as an Army guy. So knowing that now about Delta Force, what has been their reputation, in the Fort Bragg community? I'd say maybe since the kickoff of, Afghanistan and Iraq. Like, what's their vibe? What are people saying about Delta Force? Before we get into your book, like, is there a preconceived notion the unit has, around Fayetteville, Pines, that kind of area? Like, what's the relationship of the Fort Bragg Army base with Delta Force itself?
Yeah, I'd say it's very mixed. Obviously, there are many Delta Force soldiers who are perceived as, or officers who are perceived as upstanding members of the community, who are perceived as good, normal guys that happen to be very good at what they do, and that are very high in the military sort of hierarchy. That said, there's also a dark side to it, certainly. They have a reputation for doing whatever they want, for being very insular, for being, just real party guys who, attract a lot of groupies, a lot of female groupies, both military and civilian. They have a reputation for doing a lot of drugs. They have a reputation for violence against women. Women getting murdered in the community, sometimes in unsolved cases, and also, they just have a way in the eyes of some people in the community of just being sort of tribalistic and arrogant and entitled. So all those things coexist in the community where they actually live, Southern Pines, all of Moore County, and also in Fayetteville.
Copy. Okay, so how did you get interested in this story? Like, I guess let's just go into it. What happened and what piqued Seth's interest here? That something needs to be investigated. Given your understanding of the Army, Fort Bragg, the different echelons of military tiers there, like what jumped out at you where you were like, oh shit, this is interesting. This needs some attention, and I want to get after it.
It was simply the fact that those two guys had been murdered and that their bodies were found in Fort Bragg. One of them, Billy Levine, was one, and the other one was Timothy Dumas. Mm-hmm. The fact that Billy Levine was a member of Delta Force by itself was enough to motivate me to investigate, because in all the times that I had been working as a reporter, a war reporter, and then even serving in the military myself, I had never heard of Delta Force being in the news for any reason.
Right.
Positive or negative. So the fact that, one of them, his body's dumped in the woods and the police are saying, oh, this is a drug deal gone wrong. Excuse me, there's a Delta Force soldier and a drug deal gone wrong on Fort Bragg. And you're telling me that this guy previously killed someone and that the DA said that it was a justified homicide. All of that seemed very suspicious and alarming. And, the first thing I looked into was that prior homicide, the 2018 case where Billy Levine had killed a guy in his house. The guy's name was Mark Lesher. He also was a Green Beret. He was Billy's best friend. And, both of them have been drinking and doing drugs for days on end when the shooting happened. And the victim, Mark Lesher, was unarmed. And Billy shot him and killed him right in front of his little girl, who was 6 years old. And the police, he was arrested and taken to the police station, but it was immediately ruled a justified homicide. Even though Billy gave 3 inconsistent accounts of the story to police or 911 dispatchers or other people, couldn't get his story straight. He claimed that Mark had a screwdriver in his hand, which wasn't true. We know from the medical examiner's report. So despite all these inconsistencies and falsehoods, the cops and the DA just pretended to believe it and let him go. Why? It was because he's a member of Delta Force. And those guys are basically above the law. And I document case after case of that kind of thing in my book, not just Levine's case, but other cases where Delta Force operators are given a pass despite having committed serious crimes in the community.
So how did, how did that relationship between those two morph into something so bad? Were they both on some sort of leave and they were just getting after it on a bender and things just escalated in the house? Or what's kind of the account that you think actually, like, what actually happened to cause that murder?
So both of those guys had severe drug problems.
Okay.
And, Levine had done many deployments in his career, 14 deployments.
Wow.
Mark Leschiger had done fewer. He had only done 3 deployments, but still, he was a Green Beret. He was a combat veteran.
Right.
He was a lot more than most people have done. Compared to Billy, it was nothing. I mean, Billy was truly elite. He had done something like 48 months or more possibly in combat. And those are very, very kinetic deployments. Like every month, there's not a lot of downtime in those 48 months. That's rotating in and out of combat. He was dealing with a lot of combat trauma, moral injury. He had really kind of lost faith in the righteousness of the war in Afghanistan and other U.S. operations. He was also in Niger and in Israel.
Okay.
And so that's one thing that Levine had going on. He also had problems. He had marital issues. That's another thing about this characteristic of life in the Special Forces. A lot of guys have problems, family problems, because they're constantly deployed. There's a lot of infidelity. Mm-hmm. It's just it can be pretty a rough scene, the family life of a lot of these guys, and Levine was no exception. So he's got all these things going on. Mark, somewhat similar to a lesser extent, but he also was just really had low impulse control over his drug use. Apparently these guys are able to get away with using drugs. It's pretty easy for them.
What kind of drugs are we talking about? Are we talking stimulants? Are we talking, what are we talking about?
So everything, all the drugs. It would be easier to list the ones that they weren't on that day. They took their daughters. They both had daughters, young daughters. They took them to Disney World that day, and that for a long weekend. They were at Disney World for several days.
Got it.
And the whole time they were there, they're drinking and doing drugs. And then Mark apparently at some point ingested bath salts, which may have been something that he actually bought with the intention of consuming them, or it may have been cut into some other drugs that he was taking, maybe some MDMA. But in any event, he started to hallucinate and he was delusional. He thought he was being followed. And he was convinced that the car was bugged and that Billy was had been covertly tasked to serve as this minder. And Billy found all of these antics more and more annoying. Billy had severe anger issues. He couldn't control his anger sometimes. And at a certain point, so much of it built up that he just snapped, and he just, when Mark came through, because he tried to lock him out of the house, Mark got in, and when he saw him, he was just so angry that he just pulled out his weapon. Oh wow! And shot him multiple times. Just muscle memory took over. He just dealt with him like he would, any military age male on spec. That he's killed a lot of people by this point, so it was just automatic. The really sad thing is that happened right in front of Mark's daughter, who was just feet away from her father when she saw him murdered right in front of her. And Levine's daughter too saw her father kill this man, and then Levine subsequently lost custody of his daughter. Although the crime was papered over as justifiable homicide, that was the last he ever saw of his daughter. Or he lost custody of his daughter at that point. He did see her again, and that, I think, really, really sort of sent him off the deep end. Was losing custody of his daughter, I think, was really because so many bad things happened. I mean, that was just the beginning of his troubles.
So where did this murder, justifiable homicide, happen? Was this in Fayetteville or Southern Pines?
It was in Fayetteville. Billy lived in Fayetteville. He lived in just a regular suburb of Fayetteville.
Okay.
At the end of a cul-de-sac in a perfectly ordinary looking house.
Yeah.
But the scenes of darkness that ensued there, that day and then subsequently, it's almost like this like suburban version of like Apocalypse Now, because he really went off the deep end. I mean, Levine totally lost his mind after that, although he did remain an active duty operator on Delta Force.
Wow. Okay, so that was 2018.
March 2018, yeah.
Okay, so we're still in Afghanistan. There's still a lot of rotations happening. A lot of units are getting tasked out of Fort Bragg.
Mostly to Iraq and Syria, though, rather than Afghanistan was still going on, but the real action, there was a lot of action in Iraq and Afghanistan at that time.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you for clarifying. So,
Yeah.
Billy, what are his next few weeks like? Is he spending a couple weeks in jail? Is he released? Is Delta Force just going in there, or the JSOC commander like, hey, we need to get this guy out? Is CID like, what does that all look like?
He definitely didn't spend a week in jail. He didn't spend more than a few hours in jail. He was never formally arrested. He was never read his rights. He's never had to stand before a magistrate judge. Never put in handcuffs, except possibly maybe when the detectives or when the deputies first arrived at his house. But those quickly came off. And I think most significantly, he was never given a drug test. Now, if you or I caused someone else's death for any reason, chances are we're going to be taking a drug test. That's something that just happens automatically. But the fact that they didn't want to know that he was on literally all the drugs, heroin, cocaine, marijuana, MDMA, alcohol, benzodiazepines, opiate painkillers. I mean, Billy acknowledges using all of those substances in his memoir that I recently obtained. And Mark Leschiger was positive for most of those substances in his toxicology report. It is, and also eyewitnesses who are at the scene, including Mark's, or who were with him that day or just the days prior, including Mark's wife. They all of these facts attest to the fact that Billy had been on a lot of drugs that day and may have been drunk too. Yet the police didn't even give him a drug test. I think that it may seem like a small point, but it goes directly to their, willful blindness. Like they didn't want to know that he was on drugs because of what they knew they had to do, which was to find a way to let this guy off the hook, because this is a JSOC operator who has, been on countless covert operations in foreign countries, done black operations, has detailed inside knowledge of clandestine military operations. Those guys can't go to jail. And so they didn't even give him a drug test.
So is it just whoop-de-fucking-do? He just shows up back at the unit like, hey guys, like what do those next few weeks look like? Does he deploy again after March 2018 up until the time of his own death? Like what does that time period look like for old Billy?
He didn't deploy again, but not because he got in trouble, because he had naturally arrived at the point in his career where he was going to take some time to be a HALO instructor or HAHO, high altitude parachute instructor. He already was scheduled to do that. And also he was, I think, in line for some training that is given to senior enlisted men in the unit. And he wasn't going to be expected to start deploying again for several years. So it was kind of moot. Like the fact that he didn't deploy again. Instead, he went to work, teaching operators high altitude parachute jumping.
Copy. Okay.
There were no professional repercussions. And I will add that a lot of people, civilian employees of the unit, found this very strange. They that someone you can just kill a guy and just go back to work, and everyone kind of shrugs it off.
What now after the March 2018 homicide to the time of Billy's death, how many people that he interacted with have you been able to speak with or speak to?
I couldn't quantify, but many.
Okay.
Yeah, and I also have his own written account of that time period, because after my book was published, someone that he went to rehab with in Texas got in touch and sent me a copy of this memoir that Billy had written, which I knew about but hadn't seen a copy of.
Wow.
And it really confirms a lot of the details that I reported in the book, and also adds a ton of more information and detail on top of that.
So he's an instructor at Halo School, just probably having the time of his life. He's not having to deploy and prep and pre-deployment training, all that. He's probably laying low, I would imagine.
He's not having the time of his life. Sorry to interrupt you, but
no, you're good.
Just put yourself in his shoes. Like, you kill somebody,
Mm-hmm.
you kill your best friend, and he gets protected by the unit, and not charged with a crime, but now he's got to live with himself. And in some ways, that was actually worse, because it put him in this really bad place psychologically, where he was just tortured by guilt, but at the same time had to walk around pretending like he had done nothing wrong. So it was really then that he started to lose his mind. And reading his memoir, you can really see how he came just completely unglued, how these forces of guilt and regret really caused him to unravel from the inside out.
So what are the events leading up to his own death and the death of that other service member?
So Levine was actually arrested within a few months after Mark's killing. He was arrested again because all these guys were dealing drugs. And by the way, this story takes place in the context of a lot of drug dealing and a lot of drug trafficking at Fort Bragg among elite soldiers. That's where I situate the story. Billy and Mark, these are two guys that are dealing drugs on Fort Bragg and trafficking drugs.
Who are they dealing drugs to, Seth? Is it other service members? Is it
other Fort Bragg soldiers, and also civilians?
Wow.
Okay. But up until this point, it's at in Billy's case, up until this point, his drug dealing is at a pretty low level compared to what it was about to become. Because in the summer of 2018, he was arrested again because these people were staying at his house. He caught all these gun charges and drug charges. He was charged with manufacturing a controlled substance because they were cooking crack in his house. And at that point, he was kicked off of Delta Force. I think, that there's only so much you can get away with. Like, they just couldn't justify it any longer. So he was kicked out of the unit, and that's when he felt that he had lost everything because he was obsessed with his career. I mean, so at this point, he's killed his best friend, he's lost his daughter, and now he's lost the thing that means the most to him, which is his Delta Force career. The thing that he had been working towards since he was 20 years old, that he was most proud of, that gave him his whole sense of identity. Mm-hmm. And it was at that point that he started to go to work for the cartel and get involved with high-level drug traffickers and actually use his skills as a Delta Force operator at a high level in the drug trafficking business.
Do we know what cartel was involved?
So when I say the cartel, I'm using it in the same sense as like people in the community. They're talking about the people at the top of the drug trade in a given area. Because I had that same question myself. I heard so many, when I first dug into the story, people would tell me, oh yeah, he worked for the cartel. And I would think or ask, what cartel do you mean? Because I'm from Texas. And so I work on the border here. And, there's specific areas that we consider, like, this is Gulf Cartel, this is Los Zetas, this is whatever. But rather than a sort of hierarchical structure like that, in fact, Levine writes very frankly in his memoir about this. And he says that he found it not to be a hierarchy. He explicitly analyzes like the culture of the unit and the structure of the unit versus the drug traffickers that he was working with. And he said, unlike the unit, which is hierarchical and everyone has a rank, he said this collection of traffickers that he was working with was more of like a tribe or a confederation. They were all kind of equals, more or less, but they inhabited a certain tier where they were the top guys in Fayetteville. They were the top guys in North Carolina. And he's a little bit, he doesn't use people's real names. Which limits exactly how much information, or limits what can be done with the book that he wrote. It tells what he was going through, but it doesn't identify the people who might be suspects in his murder because he doesn't use their names. He suggests that, or he states that some of them were Mexicans. he describes a guy that he calls Uno. He said that he was a short guy, covered in tattoos, Mexican, built like a featherweight boxer, maybe 40 years old. That's an important person in his story. Other ones he just calls his partner. He doesn't say anything about his partner, doesn't describe him, doesn't say anything that can be used to identify him, except that at one point he makes it clear that the guy wasn't white because he went somewhere with the dude, and Billy, who was white, said that Billy, was the only white guy there. So that's the only identifying feature I can identify or figure out about the guy he calls his partner. But this partner of his was a top drug trafficker who had direct connections to Mexico and was importing, and Central America, and was importing drugs internationally by air. And Levine was advising him on how to do that better, and including things like using cargo drop parachutes to drop drugs, using halo insertion to drop drugs, because that's actually a really, really good way of a really effective way of trafficking drugs, although the number of people in the world who can do that are very few. But if you do know how to do that, you actually have a way of doing an in run around pretty much any kind of narcotics interdiction apparatus. If you can jump with a 500-pound barrel from above the reach of radar systems, I mean, that's a fantastic technique to bring to bear in the drug industry. And Levine writes all about this in his memoir, how he was helping the cartel do things like this.
Holy fuck. So before the death of his best friend, before he committed that homicide, was Levine involved with this cartel, this charade, this operation outside of the unit? Does he mention any of that?
According to his memoir, no.
Okay.
I know he was dealing drugs. He was dealing drugs since high school. And he was dealing drugs in his whole military career. Low level, just how it always goes with people who use drugs. He was the kid that smoked a lot of weed in high school, and then, also kind of deals it to fund his own use and to make a little money. And it just steadily grew and grew. But if his memoir is to be believed, and at this point, I don't have any reason to doubt it, at least on this point, it wasn't until he got kicked off of Delta Force that he started doing high-level cartel work. And he actually says in the memoir that he felt like, hey, I felt like I belonged to a team again. This is a guy who's been in the Army since he's 17 years old.
Right.
It destroyed him psychologically to lose his place. And so now he felt like he had a future again. By the way, I forgot to mention, he also talks about assembling fake documents. He had access apparently to fake passports, which is not something that's easy to counterfeit, but that's what Delta Force does. They operate under alias identities overseas. Operators have fake identities that are issued to them by the U.S. government, replete with credit cards, driver's licenses, what have you, anything you need. The unit, and I've interviewed people in my book, the people whose job it is to make those fake documents, describing that whole process. Well, Levine talks about doing that because he was setting himself up with a new identity. And he said that, I felt a sense of brotherhood. Again, I felt like these guys had my back. Everything he got from the unit, he was getting from the cartel. And he was planning to make literally a life of crime on the run at the time that he was murdered.
So this cartel, this organization and operation outside of Fort Bragg that he's involved with, at what point do they maybe turn on him, and do they welcome him in because, of him being kicked out of Delta and him, even though he murdered his friend? Are they aware of that homicide he committed? Are they kind of championing it? Or do they see it as a way that they could use him? What does that last year look like before he gets murdered?
I believe they were aware of Mark's murder, but they were mostly interested in the fact that he had been an operator who had, killed countless people overseas, who was an assassin for the U.S. government. I mean, that's literally what Delta Force is. They do assassination operations. Now, that isn't to say that they don't take prisoners from time to time, but Levine describes a number of Delta Force raids in his memoir where every single male that's on those targets dies, including in one case, a lot of people. I mean, typically there were not any male survivors of their raids. So I call that out because some former operators and stuff, people who have done podcasts have been critical of me using the term assassination and calling these assassination missions. They point out that in fact a lot of times they do take people prisoner. I don't doubt that, but it still remains the case that most of the time when Delta Force hits a target, everyone there dies. And so these guys, these cartel guys, they thought that Billy was amazing. I mean, they couldn't believe the stuff he knew. Also, really, it's not just, there's a lot of technical skills that are involved in being able to pull off operations like this. A lot of planning. I mean, Delta Force, they really spend a lot of time planning their operations, and mitigating risk is the biggest thing that they do. Figuring out what are all the things that could go wrong and how do we mitigate all those risks so we can control all these factors, go into enemy territory, take out the person we want to take out, and get out safely without losing anyone. And so Billy was steeped in that kind of thinking, and it really was useful to the people that he was working with in drug trafficking, because these are guys who are not trained to think that way and not able to think that way.
Right.
And so they start going to Levine and asking, well, how should we deal with this? How should we deal with that? And his answers in every case are usually really sensible, and it's stuff that they didn't think about. And Levine also knows how surveillance works. He knows what government capabilities exist and what are their legal limitations. So he's able to advise these guys on how to do better OPSEC. And so that's why he kept starting off getting introduced with low-level drug dealers. That's why he was able to rise so fast, so high in like the drug trafficking world in North Carolina and abroad. Like I was saying before, he was going down to Central America and working down there and stuff.
And he's doing all this while he's still in the U.S. Army and collecting that paycheck every 2 weeks. Were there any red flags at his now new unit to what this guy's behavior is and his, evening work? Like, what were there any red flags? Was anyone aware of some of the shady stuff going on?
I mean, Levine was nothing but red flags. The new unit that he was at, the USASOC is just the USASOC headquarters. It's like the headquarters administrative unit. Yeah. That's at it's just a dumping ground for Delta Force's most damaged operators. And I actually obtained a remarkable document after Levine's death. The commander of that unit, when he was interviewed by CID, used it as an opportunity to talk about how it wasn't right that they used his unit for this purpose. They were constantly giving him the most highly trained, physically fit, intelligent, and disgruntled Delta Force operators. He said, most of the time when they come here, these guys have no idea why they're reporting. A lot of them have legal problems. So they're just super angry, and a disturbance and a disruption to the good order and discipline of the company. Levine, he said that other soldiers were terrified of him because, he would always be, we're talking about, these are kids, probably 22-year-olds who have never deployed and who work in HR,
Right.
You got Levine up there to them is just like this Frankenstein monster, who is kicking supply cages and like throwing coolers and cursing people out. Levine talks in his memoir, about how first of all, he barely went into work. If he did, he would just go in, check in, do a workout, and then leave. If he saw the commander, he would just tell him "fuck you" to his face. Like, he had no respect for the lieutenant colonel who commanded this unit. No respect for that sergeant major either. And he told them so to their faces constantly. He just didn't care at all. He didn't give a fuck about any of this. And I'm quoting him here when I say that. And they were doing everything they could to get him out of the Army, but USASOC takes care of their boys, their D boys. Those guys, they are the royalty of that community. They're the elite, and they don't really suffer negative consequences for anything. And so despite all this accumulating evidence against Levine and the recommendations of the first USASOC officers to look at the question, who recommended that he be given an other than honorable discharge, they sat on it for a long, long time, ultimately reversed that decision and decided to give him a general discharge and to keep him in the unit keep him in the Army for another year. So they protected him not only in the legal system, but also administratively, which is why he was on active duty at the time of his death.
So now let's venture into that territory. What are the events leading up to Billy's death, and what did that look like?
So, there's different ways to come at it. the thing I've most recently been reading is his memoir, so I'll keep talking about that.
Yeah.
You know, his descent into paranoia is really obvious. You know, he already had these really severe anger issues, and he starts to display real paranoia, like the stuff that he's talking about. I've constantly written in the margins of it, say, is this real or is this paranoia? Because he's talking about people who are plotting to kill him. And I can't, maybe there were, but I can't tell. He also describes brutally beating people that owed him or the cartel money, and nearly killing this one junkie who stole $100 from him. He beat him almost to death, and seems proud of it. Like, this is why I say, like, Colonel Kurtz or Apocalypse Now, like the scenes he describes are so insane, where he's like, well, this guy stole $100 from me, so I taped up my wrists and put my knife here and put my gun there and went over to his house and, like, threw him against the wall and beat the shit out of him and kicked his face until his nose was crooked and he was unconscious and I was covered in blood, and everyone was looking at us in horror. Like, this is the type of stuff that he's narrating in this memoir, like, just savagely beating people. There's also police records that corroborate this. He was going around the streets of Fayetteville shooting at people. Shot at a guy named Ian Dieter, arrested on that charge, of course, released again. I mean, he was arrested in six occasions. He was arrested on felony charges in Fayetteville and not prosecuted.
Holy shit! In those 18 months, or just in his time in service?
In those 18 months.
Whoa.
Including heavy charges, besides first-degree murder, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, which is attempted murder. It can be upgraded.
And the Army is just like, whatever, just fucking letting him. There was no way anyone wanted to lock him up. Like, not under UCMJ, like.
Right. That's right. That's exactly right.
Crazy. Okay.
And I don't know if they thought they were protecting him or what, but they could have saved his life by putting him in jail. Honestly. He needed to be in jail. He was seriously a danger to other people, a danger to himself. He was crazier than I knew. I mean, reading his memoir, I realized that, like, in the book, I just totally stick to the facts and what people tell me. But now reading his memoir, I realized he was even crazier than I knew, and even more dangerous, I think, than I knew. It's amazing. Well, I don't know if he killed other people, because one thing that he says in the book is that he did all these favors for the cartel. He says, they understood what my capabilities were, and I proved it to them on multiple nights, or something to that effect. I read it, and it sounds like he's saying he did murders for hire for the cartel, but that he doesn't say explicitly, but he sure hints at it. So it's possible he's killed other people in this time period as well. Again, due to the Army, as you say, that the Army's just complete indifference to this, and their negligence and willingness to just let him slide.
So did you, as an Army guy, I've worked former Army officer, I've worked with PAO a bunch, and even now in some of the content creator stuff I do, I've worked with the U.S. Army and for big social media campaigns, worked a ton with PAO. Did you ever reach out to PAO? Did you get, blinders up from them? Did you get any information from CID as to what the fuck's going on here? Like, what was some of the sentiment coming out of those units?
So yes, at every step of the way, we saw comment from the Army, from the Special Forces, and even from JSOC, but zero comments on Levine. They had nothing to say at all. They have no explanation for their actions, and have made no attempt to defend what they did in allowing this mentally disturbed operator to continue running wild in the streets of Fayetteville. The only good information I've got, same story for CID. The only good information that I've gotten out of the military has been through FOIA requests, which they would deny if they could, but they can't just disregard the law. Now, they've really dragged their feet about it, but I sued them 3 times in federal court in the course of writing this book, and the U.S. Attorney settled all 3 of those cases in my favor. And so I got a lot of good documents that way through public records requests. But the military has been completely silent, and then in some occasions, I've asked them about other stuff that they'll talk about, but with respect to Levine, nothing, no public statements.
Have any, colleagues, teammates directly of Levine's reached out to you off the record to try to make contact and try to maybe thumbs up some of the statements and storytelling, or has anyone from Delta tried to reach out to you?
No, they haven't tried to reach out to me. I've tried to reach out to many of them.
Right. Yeah.
Because I've obtained their names. It happens regularly that their names will pop up,
Right.
either in interviews that I do or in documents that I obtain. And every time I have a name, I've reached out to them and tried to get a comment. There was some podcasters from this community have been critical of my book on the grounds that I don't give these guys a chance to comment, or I don't interview them, or I don't tell their side of the story. That's just not true. First of all, I do interview a number of Delta operators in the book who are quoted sometimes or I don't think I quote any of them by name, but I do because they all ask for anonymity.
Right.
But I do quote them on certain aspects. An important one is Jens Merritt. Jens was a close teammate of Billy's, possibly his direct superior, who was, he's not in the military anymore, as far as I know, but he was. And if you're more comfortable bleeping his name out, you can.
Yeah.
But it's in the book because he was there, present in the at the scene of Mark Lester's murder, and I called him up and told him everything that I was going to write about him. I said, "Here's exactly what I'm going to say about you. Do you have any comment?" And his response was no comment. And then I tell him, well, here's the next thing I'm going to write, and I would literally read it to him, and he said no comment. So we proceeded that way in every single case. If there is a Delta Force operator who's either named or referred to in the book, he had an opportunity to comment. But the culture is to not talk, and that's fair enough. They don't have to talk, but I'm not just going to walk away from the story at that point. No. I mean, you don't have to talk. In that case, that's fine. I'm going to interview your mom, dude. I'm going to interview your ex-wife. And then so these guys, now they're going to turn around and cry, oh, it's just like, the embittered ex-wives telling all these nonsense stories. Well, that's not the way it went down. That's not the way that the reporting was structured. And also, there's no single source anything in this book. There's not one thing in there that's single source. If it says it came from either two people or one person in a document or more than that. So, yes, the answer to the question is, yeah, we tried to get guys from this unit to talk, and I'm still open to talking. If they think I got something wrong, give me a call. I mean, it's not hard to find my email address or my phone number. Don't just talk shit on a podcast. Reach out and tell me what I got wrong.
No, I respect that. A lot of shit talking on, military podcasts these days about some people. But that's a whole nother conversation. I appreciate that context, Seth. So now, kind of in closing, we got another 10, 15 minutes here. Let's talk about Billy's death. What do the days look like leading up to that, and what happened to Billy?
What happened to Billy is that he was killed. What the days leading up to it looked like is harder to say. I interviewed the last person I could find that saw him alive one day before he died, possibly 2 days, was a woman who dealt drugs and was a heavy drug user herself, and was a tattoo artist named Jessie Marie Lensley, who Levine was completely. I know I've said this a lot of times, but he was completely insane. He showed up at her work site. So her boyfriend was abusive apparently, and she had told Billy at some point when they were doing drugs together, "Hey, this guy's a dick. He's beating me. He's turning me out on the street." So she had complained to him about this guy's behavior. She's then, days later working at this job site, working on this vehicle, because she was a mechanic as well as being a tattoo artist. And she turns around and there's Billy wearing a black ski mask and carrying a crossbow. And he's there to kill her boyfriend like that. He wanted to do her a favor by just killing this guy because, that's the way he thought of dealing with any problem. If someone was being a problem, that he would just kill them. Jesse told me his brain just didn't work anymore. She managed to stop him. The other guy, the boyfriend, ran away. She talked him down. Then he just collapses in tears, on his knees, just sobbing that I killed my best friend, saying stuff like that. I mean, this is a guy who deeply needed help. Someone needed to intervene in the situation. But they didn't because they wanted to protect the unit. They wanted to protect the Army. And they just saw Billy as a used up military part. This is just a broken operator, and we need to just move him through the system. He's not going to get in any trouble. He's going to get his pension, and he's going to go home to Michigan, and no one's ever going to talk about any of this. That was what the military was planning, but it didn't work out that way. 2 days after that is when Billy's body was found in Bragg with the other guy.
It was found on Fort Bragg, on the military base.
Yeah. He had been shot multiple times in the chest, wrapped in a blanket, and then placed in the back of his own truck, which was driven out to Fort Bragg. The police, the CID, which had initially investigated, believes that whoever killed him. So the other guy we haven't talked about at all, Timothy Dumas.
Yes.
Police believe that somebody hired Timothy Dumas, another Fort Bragg soldier, to kill Billy Levine. So I call this person the third man in the book. So there had to be 3 people involved. We know from the forensics. So Dumas and the third man team up. They go kill Billy somewhere. They somehow get the drop on him. And they shoot him multiple times in the torso. Wrap him in a blanket, put him in the back of his own truck, and then drive him out to this lake on Fort Bragg, Lake MacArthur, to dump his body. But out there in the woods, and Billy's truck has racing tires. It's not an off-road truck at all. And that sand, that terrain out there is real sandy. The truck gets stuck out there, and the plan goes sideways. And so whoever that third man was decided they needed to get rid of Timothy Dumas, to not have any witnesses. If there were drugs, he kept them. If there was money, he kept them. But Dumas was left in the woods with a bullet right in his forehead. And the other person, or persons, because it could have been more than one person, they got out of there and disappeared, leaving few traces, for the FBI to follow. And the bodies were found maybe a day later by a deer hunter who was out there in that part of the base, who found the bodies. So that's how they died. Now, who killed them is a topic that
Right.
That's what my whole book is about. And there's many different suspects, including one that the Department of Justice has accused of this double murder. A young man. I don't want to spoil the ending of the book.
No, yeah, please don't.
It's not who you would expect. Here's what I'll tell you about it. I just got off the phone with Levine's dad. I was actually talking to him earlier this morning.
Wow.
He does not believe that the government has got the right guy. And Timothy Dumas' son, who I'm also talk to regularly, he doesn't believe it either. So the family members of the victims don't believe this guy is guilty, and the guy has also pleaded not guilty. So we'll see what happens in his trial. It's not scheduled until May of 2026.
Of course. We got to wait a fucking year or something. So one, again, I've never been to Fort Bragg. I didn't know there was a lake on Fort Bragg. That is, what is it? Is it just part of like a training site on Fort Bragg? Is there on-base housing around there? What's the area where their bodies were found? What does that look like to the listener?
I've been out there. I believe that range is used for all kinds of things. It's near where the drop zones are.
Okay.
But it's, the cleared drop zones, but it's wooded, heavily wooded with pine trees. I believe they use it for land nav. And any number of things like that. There is a lake there. It's not a big lake. It's not very deep either, which is part of the mystery. Like, if these guys killed Levine somewhere else, why did they take him onto Fort Bragg? The theory really doesn't make a lot of sense. This lake, again, is not very deep. It's a shallow reservoir. It's artificial lake. It's just a dammed creek, Tuckahoe Creek, I believe it's called. But yeah, it is a lake, a small one. It's right off of Manchester Road, almost to Southern Pines.
Okay. And that part of the base, is there a lot of infill, exfil of, operator types and JSOC types? Are they familiar with that side of base, or is it more like average 80-second drop site training area?
I mean, now that you mention it, man, I didn't write this in the book because it's kind of like conjectural, but yeah, that's the road that you use to get from the unit to Southern Pines, where they all live. because Billy lived in Fayetteville, and most unit guys live in Southern Pines, or a lot of them do. I think you could say most of them, or live in Moore County. So this is the road that goes from the Delta Force headquarters, which is at the corner of McKellar's and Manchester Road, and then Manchester Road goes another 10, 15 miles to Southern Pines, in the direction of Southern Pines. And that's right where Billy's body and Dumas's bodies were found. So the location is very mysterious, especially considering the person that they've accused of this murder, who's not from anywhere near this area and would have no reason to be in that area.
And Mr. Dumas himself, the other man who was murdered, what's his background? What's his story?
So he was Chief Warrant Officer Timothy Dumas. He was a supply guy. He liked to give the impression that he was an operator. He was a real tough guy, scary dude by all accounts. But he wasn't an operator. He was a supply chief. And that said, he had deployed lots of times in his career as a JSOC, being attached to JSOC. He was at the Kandahar airfield, at least 2, possibly 4 deployments there. And he was involved in every sort of military crime imaginable. I mean, this guy's criminal career is another big part of the book, but, talking about all the types of things that go on at Fort Bragg. You got your gun running, you have your diversion of pills and stuff from the med sheds, stealing all kinds of military equipment. These guys just stole $1 million worth of MREs and sold it to people off base.
Wow.
There's a huge supply chain fraud, and Dumas, he was doing that for 19 years, man. He's
a supply guy. He's the guy. He knows how to cook the books. He knows how to report up the chain. He knows how to launder stuff. I mean, it's a brilliant position for him. So he got really good at it till the end, I guess. Was there any involvement was he active duty at the time of his death?
No, he had been kicked out. So I had read his separation packet. That's why I can confidently assert that this guy was stealing stuff from the military's whole career.
Wow.
And he was kicked out, but he wasn't kicked out for that. He was kicked out for drug use. A lot of times when you're part of this club, man, when you're part of this mafia of the special forces, when you're on the inside and you're clicked up with JSOC, you can get away with a lot of stuff that most people wouldn't. So Dumas stealing millions of dollars worth of equipment and guns and stuff, eventually he gets kicked out of the military for drug use because he, like Levine, was using tons of coke. So no prosecution, no criminal prosecution. I believe he got a general discharge. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that.
Okay.
That part's redacted. I have a beef with the military about them redacting the nature of the circumstances of discharge.
Oh, wow.
Or the character of discharge, I should say. I think that should be public information, but they started redacting that. In any case, he had been kicked out in 2016 and had written he was very embittered about this because he was kicked out just shy of his 20-year mark.
Oh, wow.
So they stiffed him out of his pension. And his plan to get revenge was he wrote this blackmail document, this letter, in which he described a drug trafficking ring in the special forces based at the Kandahar airfield between there and Fort Bragg, where they're smuggling heroin into the United States, Afghan heroin into the United States. And he was going to use this. He had been emailing all these people. He even emailed Admiral William McRaven. I've seen that email.
Wow.
Where he's making all these implicit threats. He's saying he knows about crime at high levels of the Special Operations Command. And he told a lot of people this, that the existence of the letter was corroborated by lots of sources, including one who read it in its entirety and said it was seriously incriminating shit. And it was addressed to a high-ranking general. And so for that reason, Dumas's son believes that his father was probably killed by someone who was named in that letter who wanted to prevent that information coming out. Now, I don't have any evidence of, I'm just, again, that's what Dumas's son says. And I think that's worth considering because, when your father is murdered, that's something you're going to take seriously. You're not going to speak lightly on it. And I don't think he spoke lightly on it. Same as Billy's dad. These are people who want closure. These are people who are suffering from grief, but they're saying, the government's got the wrong guy.
So what, above all this stuff, what do you want the reader, the listener, the viewer of this awesome interview to kind of take away and then to kind of think about as they're reading your book? Like what's going on at Fort Bragg like that we need to be concerned about?
Well, I don't want people to get the idea that it's just about, this murder mystery that we're discussing of Billy Levine and Timothy Dumas certainly is the narrative core of the book, but there's a lot more to it as well. And that includes a history of the special forces and a history of units like Delta Force dating back to 2001 at least, and their role in the war, the so-called global war on terrorism, which, I retell the whole story of the global war on terrorism through the perspective of black operations, which is something that, for obvious reasons, we just don't hear very much about. But it was a whole side of the war that has really never been told before. The war that guys like Billy Levine fought, the guys that wore plain clothes, who didn't wear uniforms, who only worked at night, who were working in disguises, maybe disguised as American businessmen, maybe disguised as diplomats, what have you, maybe disguised as NGOs, I think in a lot of cases. So this is a major feature of like the American war-making effort that we never hear about. So I hope that people know that that's contained in the book as well. There's other stories stuff that's going on at Fort Bragg, other drug trafficking conspiracies at Fort Bragg, including how certain airports in that area have historically been used to traffic massive amounts of cocaine and methamphetamine into the United States through airports on Fort Bragg, or let's say immediately adjacent and contiguous with Fort Bragg. So there's a lot in the book, and I just hope that if this conversation has interested, your listeners, that they'll pick up a copy and see what all the hype is about, because, the book, we had expectations for it from the beginning, but we didn't realize that it was going to blow up and be the massive bestseller that it's become.
Amazing.
And also it's been optioned for a TV show on HBO. So I think that folks that listen to your show, they would really get a kick out of it and find it interesting. So please buy the book.
Yeah, in closing, I was gonna commend you on that HBO pickup. So well done, Seth, to you and your team. And I mean, I got chills listening to you on a podcast a few weeks ago about this story. My time in the Army, I'd always heard rumblings about stuff like this. I served from 2012 to 2017. And there was always kind of like a weird air about some things and some units. And then obviously seeing some of the Army Times and other reporting that came out around after the death of these individuals, it's awesome to see the time and effort you put into this, because I think people need to fucking hear it. And there's a lot of shady stuff that happens at Army bases, and I think people need to know about it. It's not everybody's involved, but I think it's just a fascinating story that needs to be told. So Seth, I appreciate you coming on today on a Sunday. Best of luck on your media tour and the book, and then hopefully we can link up in person one day and talk about the book and watch the show. So appreciate
Absolutely, that'd be great. Yeah, thank you so much, Rob. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Awesome, Seth. Take care.
All right, thank you, Seth. Go get his book. Again, it's the Fort Bragg Cartel, Drug Trafficking and Murder in the Special Forces. And again, as I said at the top, we're hearing that HBO's got a hold of it, so can't wait to see whatever they do with that. Very much looking forward to it. So yeah, a little bit of obviously a serious show. Any caveats, anything that we missed?
No.
Nothing too crazy. I just remembered though, I forgot I did actually do something besides watch football this weekend. So shout out to Taste of Levis. It's like a little commons with like 12 restaurants that we have here, and it's Perrysburg, Ohio. And so what you do is you get a lanyard for $75, and you walk around and they do hole punches for you, and you get a small meal and a small cocktail to each place, and then you go on and vote what was your favorite at the end. So very fun. Just ended up in something a little lighter, I suppose. But yeah, so shout out to the people that set that up. Toledo Blade.
Nice. Ryan?
No caveats for me.
No caveat for
All right. Hey, no caveats for me. Take care. Take care. Make it a great week.